The email arrived at 3:47 a.m. on a Thursday, but I didn't see it until I was sipping my morning coffee, checking messages before another grueling day at Thompson Associates marketing. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth," and the sender was anonymous. By 4:23 a.m. that same morning, my 15-year marriage was over. My best friend since college was dead to me, and I was already formulating the plan that would destroy my husband's business empire and make me richer than I'd ever dreamed possible. The anonymous email contained 47 photographs spanning 3 years, showing my husband Marcus and my maid of honor Rebecca in hotel rooms, vacation rentals, and even our own home while I was traveling for work. But what the sender didn't know was that those photos would become the catalyst for the most satisfying revenge in corporate history, one that would cost Marcus his $50 million company, his reputation, and his sanity, while turning me into the CEO of a $200 million empire built on the ashes of his betrayal. At 38 years old, I had built what most people would consider a perfect life in Greenwich, Connecticut. My name is Victoria Catherine Morrison-Thompson, and I had spent the last 15 years as the devoted wife of Marcus Thompson, CEO and founder of Thompson Associates, one of the most successful marketing firms on the East Coast. Standing 5'7" with shoulder-length chestnut hair that I kept perfectly styled for client meetings, I had the kind of polished appearance that opened doors in corporate America. My green eyes, which Marcus used to say reminded him of emeralds, had a sharpness that most people mistook for ambition, but was actually strategic intelligence honed by years of watching and learning from my husband's business operations. Our home at 47 Meadowbrook Lane was a testament to Marcus's success. A sprawling colonial worth $3.2 million, complete with a pool, tennis court, and the kind of manicured gardens that appeared in Connecticut lifestyle magazines. I had sacrificed my own career aspirations to support Marcus's rise, managing his schedule, entertaining his clients, and using my MBA from Wharton to provide strategic advice that he took credit for in boardroom meetings. For 15 years, I had been the perfect corporate wife, the woman behind the man, believing that our partnership was building something lasting and meaningful. The stakes of what I was about to discover couldn't have been higher. Our marriage wasn't just personal, it was professional. I knew every client, every strategy, every weakness in Marcus's business model, because I had helped build the company from a 2-person startup in our basement to a firm with 200 employees and annual revenues of $50 million. I knew which clients were dissatisfied, which contracts were vulnerable, and most importantly, I knew that Thompson Associates' biggest client, Meridian Industries, was already frustrated with Marcus's increasingly arrogant approach to their account. But that Thursday morning, as I sat in our granite-countered kitchen wearing my silk robe and reading an email that would shatter my world, I had no idea that my pain was about to become my greatest source of power. The betrayal I was about to uncover would be so devastating, so complete, that it would transform me from Victoria the corporate wife into Victoria the corporate predator, ready to destroy everything my husband held dear. Rebecca Martinez had been my best friend since our freshman year at Northwestern University 20 years earlier. She was the maid of honor at my wedding, the godmother to the children Marcus and I never had because we were too focused on building the business first. She was also, as I was about to learn, the woman who had been sleeping with my husband in every city where I traveled for client meetings, every weekend when I visited my sick mother in Boston, and every evening when I worked late at the office that bore my married name. If you've ever suspected something was wrong in your own relationship or felt that nagging intuition that someone close to you was betraying your trust, you're not alone. Please subscribe to hear more stories of women who trusted that instinct and turned their pain into power. Now let me tell you exactly how discovering the truth about my marriage became the foundation for building an empire. My story truly begins 5 years earlier, in the spring of 2018, when Marcus landed the contract that would define both his company's future and ultimately its destruction. Meridian Industries was a Fortune 500 manufacturing conglomerate with annual revenues exceeding $2 billion. And their decision to hire Thompson Associates for a complete rebranding initiative was the kind of career-defining moment that separated small firms from major players in the marketing industry. I remember the celebration dinner at Lee, Bernardin in Manhattan like it was yesterday. Marcus had worn his lucky navy Armani suit, the one he'd bought for our wedding, and I had chosen a black Diane von Furstenberg dress that he'd complimented twice that morning. Rebecca joined us, as she often did for our business celebrations, wearing her signature red lipstick and the kind of figure-hugging dress that always made her the center of attention in any room. To the Thompson Empire, Marcus had toasted, raising his glass of Dom Perignon. And to the women who make it all possible, Rebecca had laughed, her perfectly white teeth catching the restaurant's ambient lighting. Marcus, you're going to be unstoppable now. Meridian is going to open doors you never imagined. I had felt a flush of pride that night, believing that we had achieved something remarkable. The Meridian contract was worth $8 million annually, with performance bonuses that could push it to $12 million. It represented nearly 20% of Thompson Associates' total revenue and had already attracted inquiries from 3 other Fortune 500 companies who wanted to see what Marcus could do for their brands. What I didn't know that night, as I watched my husband and best friend toast our success, was that they had been sleeping together for 6 months already. While I had been in Chicago for 3 weeks, managing the preliminary Meridian presentations, Marcus and Rebecca had been using our home, our bed, and our pool house for their affair. The celebration dinner wasn't just about landing a client, it was about celebrating. How perfectly they had deceived me while I worked 18-hour days to help secure the contract that would make us all wealthy. 5 years that followed were the most professionally successful of my marriage, but also, I now realize, the most emotionally hollow. Marcus threw himself into the Meridian account with an intensity that I interpreted as dedication to our shared future. He traveled constantly, often for weeks at a time, supposedly meeting with Meridian executives in their facilities across the country. He hired additional staff, expanded our office space in Stamford, and began talking about opening satellite offices in Los Angeles and Chicago. I supported every decision, often staying late at the office to handle administrative details, client correspondence, and strategic planning while Marcus was traveling. I managed our household, maintained our social calendar, and continued to provide the kind of behind-the-scenes support that allowed Marcus to focus entirely on growing the business. I told myself that the sacrifice of my own career ambitions was temporary, that once Thompson Associates reached the next level, I would have opportunities to pursue my own professional goals. Rebecca was a constant presence during those years, often joining us for dinner when Marcus returned from his travels, always ready with encouraging words about his business acumen and growth strategies. She had launched her own boutique public relations firm, Martinez Communications, which specialized in crisis management for high-profile clients. Her business was thriving, thanks in part to referrals from Marcus when Thompson Associates clients needed PR support. "You two are the perfect power couple," Rebecca would often say during our dinner parties, raising her wine glass toward Marcus and me. Victoria's strategic mind and Marcus's client relationships, it's like watching a masterclass in partnership. The irony of those words would become apparent later, when I realized that Rebecca's real expertise wasn't in crisis management for her clients, but in creating and managing the crisis of betraying her best friend while maintaining the appearance of loyalty and support. The first crack in my perfect life appeared in early 2022, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. Marcus had become increasingly distant and irritable, particularly when I asked questions about his travel schedule or suggested joining him on client trips. He began working even later hours, claiming that Meridian was demanding more hands-on attention and that other clients were feeling neglected. "Victoria, you're being clingy," he snapped one evening when I suggested we take a weekend trip to Napa Valley, something we hadn't done in over 2 years. "This business requires sacrifice. I thought you understood that by now." The comment stung because it implied that I didn't understand the business we had built together, that my contributions weren't significant enough for me to have an opinion about our work-life balance. But I internalized the criticism, as I had learned to do over 15 years of marriage, and redoubled my efforts to support him without asking for emotional reciprocity. Rebecca, meanwhile, seemed to have an unlimited amount of time to spend with both Marcus and me, despite her supposedly thriving business. She joined us for client dinners, helped plan our annual holiday party, and was always available when I needed someone to talk through my concerns about Marcus's increasing emotional distance. "He's under so much pressure," Rebecca would say, her dark eyes reflecting what I interpreted as genuine concern for our marriage. Building a business this size is incredibly stressful. You're being so patient and supportive. He'll recognize that eventually. What I didn't know was that Rebecca's availability wasn't friendship. It was strategy. She was managing both sides of the deception, providing Marcus with alibis while simultaneously positioning herself as my confidant and emotional support system. She was playing both roles perfectly, the supportive friend helping me understand my husband's behavior, and the passionate lover giving him everything he claimed he wasn't getting from our marriage. The second crack appeared in the summer of 2022, when I discovered that Marcus had purchased a $150,000 Porsche 911 without mentioning it to me. I found the registration documents in his desk while looking for our insurance policy information after a minor fender bender. When I confronted him about the purchase, his reaction was explosive and completely disproportionate to the situation. "It's my money, Victoria," he shouted, his face turning red in a way that reminded me of his father's temper tantrums. "I built this company. I earned this car. I don't need permission from my wife to spend my own money." The phrase, "my money," hit me like a slap. For 15 years, we had shared everything: bank accounts, investment decisions, major purchases. Suddenly, Marcus was talking about his money, his company, his decisions, as if my contributions had been insignificant. The Porsche wasn't just a car. It was a declaration of independence from our partnership and a symbol of assets he was already mentally separating from our marriage. But what hurt most was Rebecca's response when I told her about the incident. Instead of supporting me or acknowledging that Marcus's behavior was concerning, she defended him with an intensity that should have raised red flags. "Victoria, you have to understand the pressure he's under," Rebecca said over lunch at our favorite cafe in Greenwich. "Men sometimes need symbols of success to remind themselves of what they've accomplished. The Porsche probably makes him feel like all the hard work has been worth it." I accepted her explanation because I trusted her judgment and because I wasn't ready to acknowledge that my marriage might be in serious trouble. But looking back, I realized that Rebecca's defense of Marcus was so passionate because she knew exactly why he had bought the car, as a gift to himself for successfully managing a 15-year affair without getting caught. The final crack appeared in December 2022 when Marcus announced that he would be spending New Year's Eve in Miami, supposedly meeting with potential investors who were interested in helping Thompson Associates expand into the Florida market. He had never mentioned Florida expansion before, and the timing seemed suspicious since most business executives don't hold major meetings on New Year's Eve. When I suggested joining him for what could be a romantic getaway combined with business, Marcus's refusal was swift and absolute. "This is strictly business, Victoria. Having my wife there would send the wrong message about my focus and professionalism. These investors need to see that I'm completely dedicated to growth, not distracted by personal relationships." The words were like a knife to my chest. After 15 years of supporting his career, I had become a distraction rather than an asset. I spent New Year's Eve alone in our $3.2 million house, drinking champagne by myself and wondering when I had become so irrelevant to the man I had spent half my adult life building a future with. What I didn't know was that Marcus was indeed in Miami that New Year's Eve, but not with investors. He was with Rebecca, staying at the Fontainebleau Hotel in a $2,000 per night suite, celebrating their ability to deceive me for another entire year while planning how to continue their affair indefinitely. By January 2023, I was living in what I now recognize as a state of cognitive dissonance, desperately trying to reconcile the loving husband I remembered with the distant, secretive man Marcus had become. I threw myself into work, taking on more responsibilities at Thompson Associates and trying to prove my value to a man who had already decided I was dispensable. But the universe, as they say, has a way of revealing the truth when we're finally ready to handle it. And on that Thursday morning in March, as I sat in my silk robe, reading an anonymous email that would destroy my world, I was more ready than I realized to not just handle the truth, but to weaponize it in ways that would make Marcus wish he had never underestimated the woman he had betrayed. The anonymous email arrived at 3:47 a.m. on Thursday, March 16, 2023, but the timestamp would become burned into my memory along with every other detail of that morning. I was in my usual spot at our kitchen island, wearing my cream silk La Perla robe, drinking coffee from the Hermès porcelain cup that Marcus had given me for our 10th anniversary. The morning sun was filtering through our floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the Carrara marble countertops that I had spent 3 months selecting during our kitchen renovation. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth," and something about those 6 words made my stomach clench with dread even before I opened the message. The sender was listed as a friend 2023 at protonmail.com, clearly a throwaway account created specifically for this purpose. "Mrs. Thompson," the message began, "I debated sending this for months, but I can't watch you being humiliated any longer. Your husband and Rebecca Martinez have been having an affair for over 3 years. I have proof. The photos speak for themselves. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you deserve better than living a lie." Attached were 47 photographs spanning what appeared to be a 3-year period. My hands were shaking as I opened the first file, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. The first photo was dated 18 months earlier and showed Marcus and Rebecca entering the Mandarin Oriental in Boston. I remembered that day clearly because Marcus had told me he was meeting with a potential client while I was visiting my mother in her assisted living facility. I had even texted him that evening asking how the meeting went, and he had responded that it was very promising. The second photo was from inside what was clearly a hotel room. Marcus was kissing Rebecca with a passion I hadn't seen from him in years. She was wearing the red dress I had complimented her on when we all had dinner together the night before this supposed business trip. The third photo made me drop my coffee cup, which shattered against our Italian marble floor. It was taken in our pool house. I recognized the distinctive blue and white striped curtains I had custom ordered from a boutique in Manhattan. Rebecca was wearing nothing but one of my silk scarves around her neck, the Hermès scarf Marcus had given me for Valentine's Day just months before this photo was taken. I scrolled through image after image, each one more devastating than the last. Hotels in Chicago, New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. Our pool house, our guest bedroom, even our master bedroom, my bed, where I had slept beside Marcus for 15 years, believing we were building a life together. One photo was particularly cruel. Rebecca wearing my diamond tennis bracelet, the one Marcus had given me for our 12th anniversary, while they were in what appeared to be a hotel room in the Bahamas. I had spent that weekend at a conference for marketing executives, networking and learning new strategies that I planned to bring back to Thompson Associates. But the photo that broke me completely was the last one, dated just 6 days earlier. Marcus and Rebecca were in bed together, not in a hotel, but in our guest room. I could see the distinctive William Morris wallpaper that I had selected and hung myself. Rebecca was wearing my silk nightgown, the ivory one from my trousseau that I had been saving for special occasions. She was laughing at something Marcus was saying, her head thrown back in the kind of carefree joy that I hadn't experienced with my husband in years. I sat in my kitchen for 2 hours, scrolling through the photos repeatedly, as if seeing them again might somehow change their meaning or reveal them to be elaborate fakes. But every detail was authentic. From the birthmark on Marcus's shoulder to Rebecca's distinctive laugh lines that I had watched deepen over 20 years of friendship. The physical reaction was immediate and overwhelming. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my lungs. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and waves of nausea kept washing over me. I ran to our powder room and vomited until my stomach was empty, then continued dry heaving while tears streamed down my face. The emotional pain was unlike anything I had ever experienced, even worse than when my father died of cancer 5 years earlier. This wasn't just grief. It was the complete destruction of my reality. Every memory, every shared moment, every future plan I had made with Marcus now felt contaminated by the knowledge that he had been living a double life for years. But what hurt almost, as much as Marcus's betrayal was Rebecca's, this wasn't a one-night mistake or even a brief affair. This was 3 years of calculated deception. 3 years of sitting across from me at dinner tables and holiday celebrations, listening to me worry about my marriage, offering advice about how to reconnect with my husband, all while she was sleeping with him and wearing my jewelry in hotel rooms across the country. I called in sick to work for the first time in 7 years, claiming I had food poisoning. Then I spent the day doing what any woman in my situation would do. I investigated. I went through Marcus's credit card statements, phone records, and travel receipts with the methodical precision of a forensic accountant. The evidence was overwhelming once I knew what to look for. Hotel charges that didn't match his claimed itinerary. Restaurant bills for 2 in cities where he claimed to be in solo client meetings. Jewelry purchases from Tiffany and Cartier that I had never received. Clearly gifts for Rebecca. The most damning evidence was in his phone records. Hundreds of calls and text messages to Rebecca's number, often late at night when he was supposedly working or traveling. The pattern was clear. Every business trip had been partially or entirely fabricated to provide opportunities for their affair. I also discovered that Marcus had opened a separate checking account 6 months earlier, one that I had no access to. The statements showed regular transfers of $5,000 to $10,000 from our joint business account, money that was technically half mine being used to fund his affair with my best friend. By evening, my shock had transformed into something much more dangerous, cold, calculating rage. I wasn't just angry about the betrayal, though that pain was still raw and overwhelming. I was furious about the systematic theft of my time, my trust, my contributions to our business, and literally my money that Marcus had been using to wine and dine his mistress. That night, as I lay alone in our king-sized bed knowing that Marcus was in Philadelphia, supposedly meeting with a client, I began to understand something that would change the course of my life. I wasn't just the victim of an affair. I was the victim of a financial and emotional fraud that had been perpetrated by the 2 people I trusted most in the world. The anonymous emailer had given me the truth about Marcus and Rebecca's affair. But what they didn't realize was that they had also handed me the weapons I would need to destroy Marcus's business empire and build my own on its ashes. As I stared at the ceiling that night, I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. Marcus had made the mistake of betraying someone who knew every detail of his business operations, every weakness in his client relationships, and every secret about the company we had built together. If he wanted to treat our marriage as a business transaction where I was dispensable, then I would treat our divorce as a hostile corporate takeover. And by the time I was finished, Morrison-Thompson would learn the difference between a supportive wife and a formidable enemy. The war was about to begin, and Marcus had no idea that he had just awakened an adversary who was smarter, more ruthless, and infinitely more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The confrontation happened on Friday evening, 26 hours after I received the anonymous email. Marcus walked into our house at 7:23 p.m., carrying his leather briefcase and wearing the charcoal Tom Ford suit that I had picked out for him just 3 months earlier. He looked tired but satisfied, the way he always did after what he claimed were successful business trips. "Hey, babe," he said, kissing my cheek with the kind of casual affection that now felt like another layer of deception. "How was your day? You sounded terrible when you called in sick yesterday." I was sitting in our living room, having spent the entire day preparing for this moment. I had printed out all 47 photographs and arranged them in chronological order on our glass coffee table. I had also printed Marcus's credit card statements, hotel receipts, and phone records, highlighting every lie with a yellow marker. "Marcus," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk." He must have sensed something in my tone because his expression immediately became guarded. "What's wrong?" I gestured toward the coffee table. "Why don't you sit down and look at what I've arranged for you?" Marcus approached slowly, and I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing. The confident, successful businessman who had walked through our front door vanished, replaced by someone who looked pale and trapped. "Victoria, I can explain." "Explain what?" I stood up, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Explain how you've been fucking my best friend for 3 years? Explain how you've been using our money to take her on romantic getaways while I worked 18-hour days to support your business? Explain how she was wearing my jewelry and my clothes while you screwed her in our guest room? Marcus sank into the armchair across from me, his head in his hands. It's not what you think. It's not what I think. I laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Marcus, I have photographic evidence of you and Rebecca in hotel rooms across the country. I have credit card statements showing you bought her a $15,000 Cartier bracelet for her birthday while you forgot mine entirely. I have phone records showing you talked to her for 2 hours the night before our anniversary. What exactly am I misunderstanding? Victoria, please, no. I picked up one of the photos, the one showing Rebecca wearing my diamond tennis bracelet. Do you see this? This is my bracelet. The one you gave me for our 12th anniversary. The one you said symbolized your eternal commitment to our marriage. She's wearing it while you're cheating on me in the Bahamas. Marcus looked at the photo and his shoulders sagged in defeat. I never meant for you to find out this way. You never meant for me to find out at all, I corrected. You were perfectly happy to keep lying to me indefinitely while you lived your double life. It's complicated, Victoria. Rebecca and I, we connect in ways that you and I haven't in years. She understands the pressure I'm under, the sacrifices I'm making to build this business. The words hit me like physical blows. The sacrifices you're making? I gave up my own career to support yours. I managed your schedule, entertained your clients, provided strategic advice that you took credit for. I sacrificed everything for this marriage and this business, and you think I don't understand pressure? That's not what I meant. What you meant, I said, standing up and walking to the window, is that Rebecca gives you something I don't. What is it, Marcus? Is she better in bed? Does she make you feel more important? Does she not ask inconvenient questions about where you're spending our money? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his words destroyed what little was left of my heart. She makes me feel like the man I want to be instead of the man I have to be. I turned to face him, and I'm sure he could see the pain in my eyes. And what kind of man do you have to be with me? Responsible, accountable, like everything I do affects someone else. With Rebecca, I can just be myself. Your authentic self is a lying, cheating fraud who steals money from his wife to fund an affair with her best friend? That's not fair, Victoria. Fair? I felt something break inside me, like the last thread holding my composure together had finally snapped. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you telling me 3 years ago that our marriage wasn't working. Fair would have been divorcing me before you started your affair. Fair would have been not involving my best friend in your midlife crisis. I picked up another photo, this one showing them in our pool house. Do you know what the worst part is, Marcus? It's not even that you cheated. It's that you chose Rebecca, the one person in the world who knew how much I loved you, how hard I was working to make our marriage successful, how worried I was about us growing apart. You chose the one person who could betray me on the deepest possible level. Marcus finally looked up at me, and for the first time in the conversation, I saw something that might have been genuine remorse. Victoria, I know I've hurt you. Hurt me? I laughed again, but this time there were tears streaming down my face. Marcus, you haven't hurt me. You've destroyed me. You've taken 15 years of my life, 15 years of believing we were partners building something together, and you've made it all meaningless. It's not meaningless. We built something incredible together. We? I wiped my face and looked at him with what I hoped was withering contempt. There is no we, Marcus. There hasn't been for 3 years. There's been you and Rebecca living your authentic life, and there's been me living a lie. Marcus stood up and took a step toward me, but I held up my hand to stop him. Don't come near me. Don't touch me. Don't try to comfort me after what you've done. Victoria, please. Can we try to work through this? Can we try counseling? The question was so absurd that I almost laughed again. Counseling? Marcus, you've been having an affair with my best friend for 3 years. You've been using our money to fund your relationship with her. You've been lying to me every single day. What exactly do you think counseling is going to fix? We could try to rebuild what? The trust you've completely destroyed? The partnership you've been betraying for years? The marriage that you just told me makes you feel like someone you don't want to be? Marcus was quiet again, And I realized that he had no answer because there was no answer. Our marriage wasn't just damaged, it was completely destroyed, and we both knew it. "I want you out of this house tonight," I said, my voice now completely steady. "I want you to take whatever you need and find somewhere else to stay." "Victoria, this is my house too. This is the house we bought together with money from the business we built together. The business where I've been working for free for 15 years while you paid yourself a salary. I think I've earned the right to stay here while we figure out how to divide everything." What about the business? And there it was, the question that revealed what Marcus was really worried about. Not our marriage, not my emotional well-being, but the business that had always been more important to him than our relationship. "What about it?" I asked. "Victoria, you can't. The business needs to continue operating. We have employees, clients, obligations. I looked at him with amazement. "Marcus, 5 minutes ago you were telling me that Rebecca understands you in ways I never could. Now you want to talk about we? The business is separate from our personal relationship." "No, it's not." I walked back to the coffee table and picked up the credit card statements. "You've been using business funds to pay for your affair. You've been lying to our clients about your travel schedule. You've been compromising our professional relationships with your personal drama. The business stopped being separate from your personal life the moment you decided to cheat with my best friend." Marcus's face went pale. "Victoria, please don't do anything to hurt the business. We have 200 employees who depend on us. You should have thought about that before you decided to blow up our lives." "What does that mean?" I looked at my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, for a long moment, and I saw him clearly for perhaps the first time in years. He wasn't the brilliant entrepreneur I had fallen in love with. He was a selfish, reckless man who had made catastrophically bad decisions and was now realizing that there would be consequences he couldn't charm or manipulate his way out of. "It means that you've made your choice, Marcus. You chose Rebecca over me, your authentic self over our marriage, and your immediate gratification over our future. Now you get to live with those choices." "Victoria, get out," I said quietly. "Take whatever you need for the weekend and get out of my house. We'll figure out the rest through lawyers." Marcus gathered a few items and left that night, and I was finally alone with the wreckage of my life. I sat in our living room surrounded by photographs of my husband's betrayal and cried until I had no tears left. But somewhere in the depths of that pain, something else was growing. Something cold and calculating and absolutely ruthless. Marcus had destroyed our marriage and our friendship with Rebecca. But he had also made a critical tactical error. He had betrayed someone who knew every secret of his business, every weakness in his client relationships, and every mistake he had ever made. And over the next 3 years, I was going to use that knowledge to build an empire on the ashes of his arrogance. The war was about to begin, and Marcus had just handed me every weapon I would need to destroy him. The transformation began 48 hours after Marcus left, on a Sunday morning that would mark the beginning of my metamorphosis from betrayed wife to corporate predator. I woke up at 5:47 a.m. in our empty house, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I felt something other than devastation. I felt clarity. I made coffee, opened my laptop at the kitchen island, and began what would become the most important research project of my life. If Marcus wanted to treat our marriage as a business transaction where I was disposable, then I would approach our divorce as a hostile corporate takeover where he was the target. The first revelation came when I logged into our business banking system. As the company's unofficial chief financial officer for 15 years, I had maintained access to all accounts, contracts, and client communications. What I discovered made my blood run cold and my resolve burn hotter than ever. Marcus had been systematically moving money out of our joint accounts and into the separate checking account I had discovered earlier. Over the past 18 months, he had transferred $340,000, money that was legally half mine, into this account that funded his affair with Rebecca. But more damaging was what I found in his email communications with our attorney and accountant. Marcus had been planning to divorce me for over a year and had been strategically positioning assets to minimize what I would receive in the settlement. One email to our accountant, dated 6 months earlier, was particularly illuminating. We need to discuss strategies for protecting company assets in the event of a partnership dissolution. Victoria's contributions have been primarily supportive rather than revenue-generating, so I believe we can structure things favorably. The casual dismissal of 15 years of my strategic input, client relationship management, and unpaid labor was enraging. But what made it worse was the timeline. Marcus had been planning to abandon me while still sleeping in our bed, still accepting my business advice, still allowing me to work unpaid to build his company's value. The second revelation came when I analyzed our client database with fresh eyes. Thompson Associates had 127 active clients, but the revenue distribution was heavily skewed. Meridian Industries alone represented $12 million in annual billings, nearly 24% of our total revenue. The top 10 clients generated $31 million or 62% of our income. This concentration was a critical vulnerability that Marcus had always worried about privately, but had never addressed strategically. More importantly, I realized that I had been the primary relationship manager for many of these crucial accounts. While Marcus was the public face of the company, I had been handling the day-to-day strategic communications, project management, and problem-solving that kept clients satisfied. I knew their pain points, their internal politics, their budget cycles, and their frustrations with our service delivery. The third revelation was the most powerful. Rebecca's crisis management firm, Martinez Communications, had become increasingly intertwined with Thompson Associates over the past 3 years. She was receiving $200,000 annually in referral business from our clients, and several of our biggest accounts had specifically requested her services for sensitive projects. The personal and professional relationships had become so entangled that exposing the affair would create chaos in both businesses. By Sunday afternoon, I had identified my strategy. I wouldn't just divorce Marcus and walk away with half of our assets. I would systematically destroy his business empire while building my own, using every advantage that 15 years of inside knowledge provided. The plan required 3 phases: intelligence gathering, client extraction, and competitive domination. Phase 1 began Monday morning when I arrived at our Stamford office as if nothing had changed. I smiled at our receptionist, chatted with our account managers, and attended our weekly staff meeting where Marcus announced that he would be working from home more often to focus on strategic planning. Over the following weeks, I documented everything: client contracts, renewal dates, pricing strategies, profit margins, and most importantly, every complaint, concern, or suggestion for improvement that our clients had shared. I copied files to encrypted drives, forwarded critical emails to my personal account, and began building comprehensive dossiers on each major client. I also started having informal coffee meetings with key clients, ostensibly to check on their satisfaction with our services, but actually to plant seeds of doubt about Thompson Associates' future direction. I was subtle but strategic, mentioning that the company was going through some changes and asking if they had any concerns about continuity of service. The response was more revealing than I had anticipated. During a lunch meeting with Janet Morrison, the Chief Marketing Officer at Meridian Industries, I learned something that would become the cornerstone of my revenge strategy. "Victoria," Janet said over her Caesar salad at the Capitol Grill, "can I be honest with you about something that's been bothering me?" "Of course," I replied, keeping my expression neutral while my heart rate accelerated. "Marcus has been different lately. More arrogant, less collaborative. He used to ask for our input and really listen to our concerns. Now, he seems to think he knows what's best for our brand better than we do." Janet continued, "Just last month, he presented a campaign concept that we had explicitly rejected 6 months ago. When I reminded him of our previous feedback, he actually said that we needed to trust his expertise instead of being so risk-averse. It was incredibly condescending." "I see," I said carefully. "That doesn't sound like the Marcus I know." "Exactly. The Marcus we started working with 5 years ago was hungry, collaborative, and innovative. This version seems to think he's too important for our input. Honestly, if it weren't for you managing the day-to-day relationship and keeping things on track, we probably would have started looking at other agencies already." That conversation changed everything. I realized that Marcus's newfound arrogance, probably fueled by his affair and his secret plans to divorce me, was already damaging his most important client relationship. And Janet's comment about my role in managing their account revealed something crucial. The clients weren't just satisfied with Thompson Associates, they were specifically satisfied with me. Over the next month, I had similar conversations with 8 other major clients. The pattern was consistent. Marcus had become difficult to work with, but they valued my strategic input and relationship management. Several mentioned that they would be interested in continuing to work with me if I ever started my own firm. By the end of April, I had gathered enough intelligence to begin Phase 2, client extraction. But first, I needed to establish my own company and create the infrastructure to support a major client transition. Morrison Strategic, LLC was incorporated on May 3, 2023, with me as the sole owner and CEO. I chose the name deliberately. Using my maiden name instead of Thompson sent a clear message about independence and new beginnings. I secured office space in a luxury building in Greenwich, just 15 minutes from Thompson Associates, but in a different jurisdiction to avoid any potential legal complications. I hired 3 key employees before I poached a single client. Sarah Chen, a brilliant account director who had been passed over for promotion at Thompson Associates despite outstanding performance. Michael Rodriguez, a creative director who had been frustrated with Marcus's increasingly conservative approach to campaigns. And Jennifer Walsh, a data analyst whose strategic insights had been consistently ignored by Marcus but appreciated by me. All 3 were eager to join Morrison Strategic, partly because I offered them significant salary increases and equity stakes, but mostly because they had grown tired of working for someone who took credit for their ideas while dismissing their professional development. Phase 2 officially launched on May 15th with a phone call to Janet Morrison. "Janet," I said, "I need to tell you something important. Marcus and I are getting divorced, and I'm leaving Thompson Associates to start my own firm. I wanted to give you advance notice because I know this will impact your account management." "Oh my God, Victoria, I'm so sorry." Janet's response was immediate and genuine. "Are you okay? What happened?" "I'm fine, thank you for asking. It's been a difficult time, but I'm excited about the future. I'm launching Morrison Strategic with some of the best talent from Thompson Associates, and we're going to focus on providing the kind of collaborative, strategic partnership that I know you value. Victoria, can I ask you something directly?" "Of course." "If Meridian wanted to work with Morrison Strategic instead of Thompson Associates, would you be interested in taking on our account?" The question I had been hoping for delivered exactly as I had anticipated. "Janet, I would be honored to continue our working relationship. In fact, I think I can provide even better service now that I'll be able to focus completely on strategy and client relationships instead of managing internal company politics. Let me talk to my team, but I think we'd be very interested in making that transition." The phone call lasted 43 minutes, and by the end, Janet had committed to moving Meridian's entire $12 million account to Morrison Strategic, contingent on a smooth transition plan and competitive pricing. 3 days later, I had similar conversations with 6 other major clients. Within 2 weeks, Morrison Strategic had signed contracts worth $23 million in annual billings, nearly half of Thompson Associates' total revenue. But the real masterpiece was yet to come. Marcus had built his business on the foundation of the Meridian account, but he had also made that account dependent on systems, processes, and relationships that I had created and managed. When Meridian left Thompson Associates, they wouldn't just be taking their $12 million in annual billings. They would be taking the credibility and track record that attracted other Fortune 500 clients. The devastating phone call from Marcus came on May 22nd. Exactly 2 months after I had discovered his affair. "Victoria, what the fuck have you done?" His voice was shaking with rage and what sounded like panic. "I've started my own business, Marcus. I thought you'd be proud of my entrepreneurial spirit. You stole my clients." "Meridian just terminated their contract. They're going with your new firm. They're going with Morrison Strategic because they want to continue working with me. You said it yourself. I was just providing support while you handled the important business relationships." Apparently, the clients had a different perspective on who was providing value. This is industrial sabotage, Victoria. I could sue you for this. For what? Starting a competing business? Using my own knowledge and relationships to build a client base? Marcus, everything I did was completely legal. I signed a non-compete agreement with Thompson Associates, but since I'm getting divorced from the owner, that contract is null and void. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. You're destroying 15 years of work. No, Marcus. I'm finally getting compensated for 15 years of work. You made it clear that you didn't value my contributions to Thompson Associates. Now you get to see what those contributions were actually worth. Victoria, please. We can work this out. We can restructure the partnership. You can become a full partner with equity. A full partner? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marcus, I was always a full partner. I just wasn't getting paid like one. But that's not the real issue, is it? The real issue is that you chose Rebecca over me, and now you're facing the consequences of that choice. This isn't about Rebecca. Everything is about Rebecca. Your affair with my best friend has been the driving force behind every decision you've made for 3 years. It's why you started moving money out of our joint accounts. It's why you've been planning to divorce me while still using my strategic input to grow your business. It's why you became arrogant with clients, because you thought you were invincible. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, almost defeated. What do you want, Victoria? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You chose to betray me personally and financially. You chose to treat me as dispensable while benefiting from my work. Now you get to learn what it feels like to be discarded by someone you thought you could manipulate. I hung up the phone and immediately called Janet Morrison. Janet, it's Victoria. I have a proposition for you that I think you're going to love. The plan I was about to propose would not only secure Meridian as a client for Morrison Strategic, it would position my new firm to compete directly with Thompson Associates for every major account in the industry. And within 3 years, it would make me the CEO of a company worth more than Marcus had ever dreamed possible. The student was about to become the master. And the master was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating the woman he had betrayed. 18 months after discovering Marcus's affair, I stood in the corner office of Morrison Strategic's new headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, looking out at Central Park while reviewing the quarterly reports that would make me one of the youngest female CEOs of a $200 million company in the marketing industry. The view was spectacular, but what made the moment truly satisfying was the phone call I had just finished with my attorney, who had confirmed that Thompson Associates had officially filed for bankruptcy protection that morning. The rise of Morrison Strategic had been swift and devastating to my former husband's business empire. After securing the Meridian account and 6 other major clients in our initial wave, we had spent the following year systematically outmaneuvering Thompson Associates in every competitive situation. My inside knowledge of Marcus's pricing strategies, service delivery weaknesses, and client management failures had given us an insurmountable advantage in every pitch. But the real breakthrough had come 8 months earlier when Meridian Industries offered Morrison Strategic something unprecedented, a 5-year strategic partnership worth $60 million that would make us their exclusive marketing agency for all North American operations. Janet Morrison had called me personally to deliver the news. Victoria, I need you to know that this isn't just business, Janet had said during that transformative phone call. Your team's performance over the past year has been exceptional. You've increased our market share by 12% while reducing our marketing costs by 18%. That kind of strategic impact is exactly what we hoped for when we decided to work with Morrison Strategic. The Meridian partnership had immediate ripple effects throughout the industry. Within 6 months, Morrison Strategic had been contacted by 17 Fortune 500 companies who wanted to explore working with the firm that had revolutionized Meridian's market position. We were featured on the cover of Advertising Age with the headline, "The Strategic Revolution: How Morrison Strategic is Redefining Client Partnership," and I was profiled in Fortune magazine as one of 40 under 40 business leaders to watch. Meanwhile, Thompson Associates was hemorrhaging clients and revenue. After losing nearly $30 million in annual billings to Morrison Strategic, Marcus had been forced to lay off 60% of his staff and move to smaller offices in Stamford. The company that had once employed 200 people and generated $50 million in annual revenue was now operating with fewer than 40 employees and struggling to maintain $15 million in billings. The personal consequences for Marcus had been equally devastating. His affair with Rebecca had become public knowledge in Greenwich's tight-knit business community after I had strategically shared the story with 3 influential social connections who I knew would spread the information discreetly but effectively. The man who had once been regarded as a successful entrepreneur was now viewed as someone who had destroyed his marriage and business through reckless personal decisions. Rebecca's crisis management firm had also suffered collateral damage. When her affair with Marcus became known, several high-profile clients had quietly ended their relationships with Martinez Communications, unwilling to be associated with someone whose personal conduct contradicted her professional expertise in reputation management. Her annual revenue had dropped from $800,000 to less than $200,000, and she had been forced to operate as a solo practitioner from a shared office space. But the most satisfying moment had come 6 months earlier during a chance encounter at the Capitol Grill in Greenwich. I was having dinner with potential investors who were interested in providing growth capital for Morrison Strategic's expansion into European markets. Marcus and Rebecca were at a table across the restaurant, and I couldn't help but notice how different they both looked. Marcus had aged dramatically over the past year. His hair was grayer, his face was drawn with stress, and he was wearing an off-the-rack suit that was a far cry from the custom-tailored Tom Ford pieces he used to favor. Rebecca looked equally diminished, her signature confidence replaced by something that seemed defensive and desperate. They had spotted me with my dinner companions, and I could see them having an intense whispered conversation while glancing in my direction. Finally, Marcus had approached our table. "Victoria," he said quietly, "could I speak with you privately for a moment?" I excused myself from my companions and followed Marcus to a quiet corner of the bar area, curious about what he could possibly want to say to me. "I know you have every right to hate me," Marcus began. "But what you've done to the business, it's destroying people's livelihoods. We've had to let go of employees who worked for us for years." I looked at my former husband with a mixture of contempt and something that might have been pity. "Marcus, you made the choice to have an affair with my best friend while using our money to fund your relationship. You made the choice to plan a divorce while continuing to benefit from my unpaid labor. You made the choice to become arrogant with clients and take credit for work you didn't do. The consequences you're experiencing are the direct result of your own decisions. But innocent people are being hurt." "Innocent people have been hurt all along," I interrupted. "I was innocent when you decided to cheat on me for 3 years? The employees you're worried about now were innocent when you were stealing money from our joint accounts to pay for hotel rooms with Rebecca. The difference is that now the consequences are affecting you instead of just me." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he looked up at me, I saw something I had never seen in 15 years of marriage: genuine remorse and fear. "Victoria, I know I don't deserve to ask this, but is there any way we could work together again? Maybe merge our companies, or you could acquire Thompson Associates. I'd be willing to work for you." The proposition was so absurd that I almost laughed. "Marcus, you had the opportunity to work with me for 15 years. You chose to treat me as unpaid support staff while you built your reputation and your wealth. Now you want to work for me because you've realized that I was actually the strategic mind behind Thompson Associates' success? I know I made mistakes. You made choices, Marcus. And one of those choices was deciding that I was dispensable. Now you get to live with being dispensed with." I turned to walk back to my table, then stopped and looked back at him. "Oh, and Marcus, that $340,000 you transferred out of our joint accounts to fund your affair? My attorney recovered it with interest during the divorce settlement. I used it as seed capital for Morrison Strategic, so in a very real sense, you funded the company that destroyed your business." The look on Marcus's face was worth every sleepless night I had endured during the darkest period of my life. Now, standing in my corner office 18 months later, I reflected on the complete transformation of my circumstances. Morrison Strategic employed 180 people across offices in New York, Los Angeles, and London. We had annual revenues of $200 million and were projected to grow to $300 million within 2 years. I owned 100% of the company's equity, which independent valuators had assessed at $150 million. My personal life had also been transformed in ways I hadn't expected. 6 months earlier, I had met Dr. James Richardson, a corporate psychologist who specialized in helping executives navigate major life transitions. James was brilliant, kind, and most importantly, he admired my professional accomplishments without feeling threatened by my success. Our relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Everything my marriage to Marcus had never been. I had also reconnected with friends and interests that I had neglected during my years as a corporate wife. I was taking art classes, traveling to places I had always wanted to visit, and most surprisingly, I had discovered that I genuinely enjoyed running a company and building a business culture based on collaboration and respect. The final piece of my victory had come that morning with the news that Thompson Associates was filing for bankruptcy. Marcus would lose everything: the company, his reputation, and most of his personal assets. Rebecca's business was also struggling, and their relationship had reportedly become strained under the pressure of their professional and financial difficulties. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of my triumph wasn't the money or the success. It was the knowledge that I had proved my worth in the most definitive way possible. For 15 years, Marcus had benefited from my strategic input while treating me as a supporting character in his success story. Now the entire business community knew that I had been the real architect of Thompson Associates' growth, and that Marcus, without me, was just another failed entrepreneur who had confused luck with skill. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, my assistant informed me that Marcus had called requesting a meeting. I smiled and told her to schedule it for the following week. After 18 months of systematic destruction, I was curious to hear what my former husband thought he could possibly offer me now. The war was over, and I had won more completely than I had ever imagined possible. But the most important victory wasn't professional or financial, it was personal. I had discovered that the woman Marcus had treated as dispensable was actually invaluable. And that discovery had transformed me into someone far more powerful than I had ever been as his wife. The student had indeed become the master, and the master had built an empire from the ashes of betrayal. 3 years after discovering Marcus's affair, I stood on the stage of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, accepting the Entrepreneur of the Year award from the American Marketing Association. The audience of 800 marketing executives, Fortune 500 CEOs, and industry leaders gave me a standing ovation as I approached the podium, wearing a custom-designed midnight blue Valentino gown that cost more than Marcus's monthly salary at his new job. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and confident in a way that would have been impossible during my years as a corporate wife. 3 years ago, I was told by someone I trusted that I was dispensable, that my contributions were primarily supportive rather than revenue-generating. Tonight, I stand before you as the CEO of Morrison Strategic, a company that has generated over $600 million in revenue for our clients and has been valued at $400 million. I paused, looking out at the audience and spotting several familiar faces from my former life, including Janet Morrison from Meridian Industries, who was beaming with pride. I want to share something with you that most people don't know about success in our industry. The most important strategic decisions are often made not in boardrooms, but in quiet moments of crisis, when we have to choose between accepting someone else's definition of our worth or proving our own value in the marketplace. The audience was completely engaged, and I could see people leaning forward to catch every word. Morrison Strategic exists because someone I loved made the mistake of underestimating me. He confused my supportive nature with weakness, my collaborative approach with lack of ambition, and my commitment to our partnership with dependence. That mistake cost him everything and gave me the motivation to build something extraordinary. I went on to share the lessons I had learned about resilience, strategic thinking, and the importance of recognizing your own value even when others don't. I talked about building a company culture based on respect and collaboration, about the importance of ethical business practices, and about how personal integrity translates into professional success. But what I didn't share that night was the full story of how completely Marcus's world had collapsed, or how my rise had been accompanied by his systematic destruction. Thompson Associates had indeed declared bankruptcy 18 months earlier, and Marcus had been forced to liquidate all remaining assets to pay creditors and former employees. The man who had once owned a $50 million company and lived in a $3.2 million house now worked as a marketing consultant for a mid-sized firm in Hartford, earning $75,000 a year and living in a rented apartment. Rebecca's business had also failed completely. Martinez Communications had closed 8 months after Thompson Associates declared bankruptcy, and Rebecca had been forced to take a job as a marketing coordinator at a nonprofit organization in Boston. The woman who had once earned $800,000 annually was now making $45,000 and struggling to pay off the debts she had accumulated during her failed attempt to rebuild her reputation. Their relationship had ended acrimoniously 6 months earlier when the financial and professional pressures had finally destroyed whatever passion had sustained their 3-year affair. According to mutual acquaintances, they blamed each other for their respective business failures and had become bitter enemies rather than devoted lovers. But the most satisfying development had been the revelation that had come to light during Thompson Associates' bankruptcy proceedings. A forensic accounting investigation had discovered that Marcus had been systematically overcharging clients and underreporting revenue to avoid paying taxes, practices that I had been unaware of during our marriage. The IRS had filed criminal charges for tax evasion, and Marcus was facing the possibility of federal prison time in addition to his financial ruin. The investigation had also revealed that Rebecca had been complicit in some of these financial irregularities, having helped Marcus create fake invoices and shell companies to hide income from both the IRS and from me during our divorce proceedings. She was also facing federal charges and had been forced to hire a criminal defense attorney with money she didn't have. Morrison Strategic, meanwhile, had continued to grow at an unprecedented rate. We now had offices in 8 cities across North America and Europe, employed over 300 people, and had been recognized as one of the fastest-growing companies in the marketing industry. Our client roster included 37 Fortune 500 companies, and we had expanded into adjacent services like strategic consulting and digital transformation. More importantly, Morrison Strategic had been built on the foundation of everything I had learned about what not to do from watching Marcus's failures. We paid our employees competitive salaries plus equity stakes, we maintained transparent financial practices, and we built client relationships based on genuine partnership rather than exploitation. The personal transformation had been equally remarkable. I had discovered strengths and capabilities that 15 years of supporting someone else's ambitions had never allowed me to develop. I was a natural leader, a strategic visionary, and most surprisingly, someone who genuinely enjoyed the challenges of building and running a complex organization. My relationship with James Richardson had evolved into something beautiful and sustainable. 8 months earlier, he had proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley, and we were planning a wedding for the following spring. James understood my professional commitments and supported my ambitions while maintaining his own successful practice. More importantly, he treated me as an equal partner in every aspect of our relationship. I had also rebuilt my social circle with people who valued integrity and authenticity. The Greenwich social set that had defined my life as Marcus's wife had been replaced by entrepreneurs, artists, philanthropists, and other accomplished women who had built their own success rather than inherited or married into it. The only relationship from my former life that I had maintained was with my mother, who had recovered from her health issues and moved to a beautiful assisted living community in Westchester that I could easily afford thanks to Morrison Strategic's success. She was proud of what I had accomplished, but more importantly, she was relieved to see me happy in a way that she had never seen during my marriage to Marcus. As I concluded my acceptance speech that evening, I shared one final thought that had become my personal philosophy. The people who betray us often give us the greatest gift possible, the motivation to discover who we really are when we stop trying to be who they wanted us to be. My former husband told me I was dispensable, and in trying to prove him wrong, I discovered that I was actually invaluable. That discovery changed not just my life, but the lives of everyone who works with Morrison Strategic and everyone whose careers we've helped build. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes. But the moment that meant the most to me came afterward. When Janet Morrison approached me at the reception, "Victoria," she said, embracing me warmly, "I need you to know that working with Morrison Strategic has been the most rewarding professional relationship of my career. You didn't just save Meridian's marketing initiatives. You revolutionized how we think about brand strategy. We're better as a company because of your insights." "Thank you, Janet. That means more to me than you know." "Can I tell you something that I've never shared before?" I nodded, curious about what she might reveal. "When you first told me about your divorce and starting Morrison Strategic, I was actually worried. I liked you personally, but I wasn't sure if you could handle the strategic leadership without Marcus. I thought he was the brilliant visionary and you were the supportive partner." Janet smiled and shook her head. "It took me about 6 weeks to realize that I had it completely backward. You were the strategic mind behind Thompson Associates, and Marcus was just the front man taking credit for your work. The difference in service quality and strategic innovation was obvious almost immediately." That conversation crystallized something I had been thinking about throughout the evening. My victory over Marcus wasn't just personal or financial. It was proof that I had always been capable of extraordinary things. I had just been convinced by someone I loved that my role was to make him successful instead of building my own success. As I returned home to my penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side that night, I reflected on the 3-year journey from betrayed wife to industry leader. The woman who had discovered her husband's affair in a silk robe at a kitchen island had been transformed into someone who commanded respect, built wealth, and created opportunities for hundreds of other people. Marcus had thought he could discard me after using my talents to build his business, but his betrayal had actually liberated me to discover what I was truly capable of achieving. Rebecca had thought she could steal my husband and my life, but her treachery had motivated me to build a life far better than anything I had ever imagined possible. The final irony was that Marcus's affair with my best friend, which had been intended to give him freedom from the responsibilities of marriage, had actually cost him his freedom entirely. He was now facing federal prison time, financial ruin, and social disgrace, while I was living the kind of life that had always been beyond his reach. The student hadn't just become the master. She had surpassed everything the master had ever dreamed of accomplishing. And she had done it using the very talents and capabilities that he had dismissed as merely supportive. As I looked out at the Manhattan skyline from my living room that night, I felt grateful for the anonymous email that had shattered my world 3 years earlier. Without that devastating revelation, I might have spent the rest of my life underestimating my own worth and accepting someone else's definition of my capabilities. Instead, I had learned that the most powerful transformations often begin with the most painful betrayals, and that sometimes losing everything we thought we wanted is the only way to discover everything we're truly capable of becoming. For any woman who has ever been told she's dispensable, who has ever been betrayed by someone she trusted, or who has ever wondered if she's capable of more than she's been allowed to achieve, I want you to know this. Your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to recognize it, and your potential is not limited by someone else's willingness to support it. Sometimes the greatest gift our enemies give us is the motivation to prove them spectacularly wrong. Thank you for joining me on this journey of transformation and triumph. If Victoria's story resonates with your own experiences or inspires you to pursue your own dreams of independence and success, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please subscribe to our channel for more stories of women who turned betrayal into triumph. And remember that your greatest comeback might be just one courageous decision away from changing everything.